Dawn was watching the dirt road with a mixture of nostalgia and dread. It had been almost 15 years since she'd last been this close to her grandfather's house, and all sorts of nerves and forgotten memories were bubbling to the surface. Well, the passenger's voice rumbled with the harsh texture of the road. This is fun. Oh, it's the best, Dawn rattled back. You know, when I was little, this road felt like it was 100 miles long. I wish they would just pave the thing. As the rocky surface reverberated through the car and into the young woman's bones, more and more memories were returning. To make it less terrible, my dad and I used to do dueling Vaders. In the passenger seat, Maeve looked confused. You know, Dawn said with a tired smile. Luke, I am your father. She said the phrase in her deepest, most drawn-out voice, allowing the road to lend its rumbling effect. I want to know what happened to the plans they sent you. Despite never being a Star Wars fan, Maeve couldn't help but smile too. Just ahead was the last house on Gentle Rain Drive, the one that, according to Dawn's lawyers, belonged to her now. The mailbox stood at an angle from the ground, but was otherwise just as she remembered it. Around the rusty old thing were what had to be over a dozen packages, all placed at the foot of a hand-painted sign which read, "Leave all deliveries here." 2 exclamation points. God, I hope none of those are groceries, said Maeve, savoring the stillness of the non-moving vehicle. With my luck, Dawn shrugged, half of them are probably raw meat and yogurt. The two friends looked at each other and, after a few serious seconds, shared a laugh. Are you ready for this? Maeve raised her eyebrows. Not really, Dawn said, releasing a long sigh. But the quicker we get this over with, the sooner we can get back to that brew pub we passed. There's my girl, Maeve briskly tapped the woman's hand. As the Mazda turned off the dirt road, rocks were fired behind and sent plink-plunking under the chassis. The long driveway had been paved, but not recently. As Dawn's eyes drank in the surroundings she had not seen in well over a decade, her heart renewed in its nervous pounding. The tree on the right brought back visions of summer. She could still hear nearby chickadees calling out their names, while a much younger version of herself played in its branches. The Mazda was parked in front of an old farmhouse. Seeing its current state caused Dawn's heart to sink. Aside from a much-needed coat of paint, the front porch was sagging on one side, and there were numerous missing shingles. Her eyes moved from blemish to blemish until her attention was eventually pulled to a dilapidated barn off to the left. For a long while, she stared silently at the structure, focusing on the wide double doors, which seemed to be pulsing in time with her heart. So, how long has it been? Maeve's voice practically made Dawn jump out of her skin. Oh, she swallowed hard, then turned to look back at the house. 15 years. That was the last time I spent any time here. Her stern expression gave way to a wistful smile. Used to be 3 weeks every summer. We called it Grandpa Camp. Maeve put a hand on her friend's shoulder, and for a brief second their eyes met. She knew some of what had happened back then, how Dawn's grandfather had abruptly severed all ties and communication with the family when the girl was barely 12. The man never gave an explanation for this, nor had he ever reneged on the decision, refusing to reach out to his granddaughter, even when both her parents were killed in a head-on collision less than a year later. It was all too much for someone so young. Hell, if it hadn't been for Dawn's aunt and uncle, she would have been forced through the system. Why do you keep looking at that barn? Maeve asked. Oh, I was just wondering if he kept it. After saying this, Dawn began walking toward the old barn. It was his special lady, the thing that he loved more than us. Hearing this, Maeve's expression fell, though she didn't say anything. Not that I can blame him, Dawn went on. She certainly was something. A 1969 Chevrolet Camaro Z28, Dusk blue. Harry used to let me work on her with him. Just little things, but still, after a while, she kind of became our special lady. Standing before the double doors, Dawn could see they were fastened with an oversized padlock. After trying both of the keys that had been bequeathed to her by the estate lawyer, she frowned. Shit. Well, the key for this must be in the house, somewhere. Just then, Maeve squealed, jumping about 2 feet back. What? Dawn gasped. What happened?
Something just. It went under the door. A snake, I think.
Dawn shook her head and snickered. Welp, this is the outside, princess. They have those here. Maeve responded with a crisp, fuck you smile, and then gave in to a full body shudder. Can we just go check out the house now? Sure. Come on. Dawn put her arm around her friend. It wasn't until the girls were almost to the lopsided porch before one of them spoke again. Dawn? Yeah? You ever see a white snake with a red tail? When you used to stay here, I mean? Dawn thought for a moment and then shook her head. Grandpa Camp had the occasional garter, maybe, but nothing like that. Realizing her friend needed additional comfort, she pursed her lips. Look, I really appreciate you being here, coming all this way. I know it's not fun, but there's no way I could have done this alone. Maeve let out a deep, cleansing breath. I mean, it's kind of fun. She glanced over at the barn. There just better not be any more snakes. For the next 45 minutes, the two friends took in the hoarder's dream that had belonged to Harry Lagrange. The cracked ceilings, every creaking board, and the uncountable stacks of old books and boxes. They were all Dawn's now. As it turned out, the packages they'd seen at the foot of the drive were barely the tip of an iceberg. It was all too much to process. The horror of unwanted responsibility that she had inherited from a grandfather who had stopped acknowledging her existence a long time ago. For a fleeting second, she considered leaving a candle burning beside one of those towering book pillars on her way out. Hey, called Maeve from the kitchen. There are some keys on the wall over here. Oh yeah? Anything that looks like it's for a huge freaking padlock? Or maybe an old Chevy? Not really. These ones are all labeled cellar, attic, back door, side door. Geez, she scoffed. Guy had a different lock for every door in the house. Paranoid much? Dawn hit a surge of sadness with an exaggerated shrug. Once in the kitchen, she started checking the drawers and cabinets. But after another 20 minutes of soul-crushing disappointment, she released a sigh. How about we call it for today? Maeve looked surprised. Really? What about upstairs and the cellar? Dawn shook her head. Next time. I just want to peek at the backyard and we can go. After exiting the way they'd come in, the two women moved around the house, though through the unmanaged grass. While Maeve worried about unseen snakes in the grass, Dawn stared at the decrepit side structure. Though it was probably a trick of the wind, she could swear the barn was whispering to her, steering her feet in a new direction. Feeling inexplicably lightheaded, her foot connected with something that made a crisp cracking sound. Did you just break something? Asked Maeve. Looking down, Dawn put a hand over her mouth. She was unable to restrain a swell of emotion as she beheld the now smashed lawn ornament. Oh my God, she said, drawing out the phrase. I remember now. I wanted to paint it blue to match the car. As she lifted the largest of the clay pieces, something fell out. The leather fob was emblazoned with the Chevrolet symbol and connected to a pair of keys via a silver ring. When she stood up, Dawn grinned before making a beeline for the barn. Maeve, on the other hand, was in no hurry. From a short distance, she watched as her friend fumbled with the padlock for a few seconds before letting out a triumphant whoop. After that, the doors were thrown wide open and the woman disappeared inside. For a series of slowly taken steps, Maeve just listened, waiting to hear some sign of what had been found within. She couldn't have said why she was so nervous. That gross white snake with a red tail was certainly playing a part, but there was more to it. A pervasive dread that she couldn't shake about that ugly old barn. Dawn? She called out nervously. Hey, what'd you find in there? Receiving no answer, Maeve swallowed and took 2 more steps. Donnie? It's here. The voice echoed from inside the barn. I fucking knew he'd never give this thing up. His own flesh and blood, sure, but not his precious Z28. Maeve was almost to the gaping doors when she'd heard the sound of a very old engine trying to start. Once Maeve stood in the double doors, she could feel reverberations on her skin, perhaps from the struggling engine, perhaps from something else. It's spinning, but it won't turn over. Dawn sounded pissed. Come on, you sack of shit. Start. If Harry took such good care of you, prove it. Just turn the fuck over. When the engine roared back to life, something strange happened. From Dawn's perspective, the hood flew open so fast it nearly smashed into the windshield before slamming shut again with a loud bang. Stranger still was the fact that her very good friend was no longer there. Abruptly, she exited the dusk blue Camaro, wearing a look of confusion. Maeve? Receiving no answer, Dawn moved to the gaping doorway, right where her friend had been only seconds before. Confounded, she looked up and down Harry's property, but there was nobody. Maeve! Dawn called out louder this time, but the result was no different. With a hand on her forehead, she turned back to the still running Z28. What she saw caused her breath to freeze in her lungs. There was a foot and part of a leg sticking out of the car's hood. An unlikely place for a limb, made worse by the fact that it was wrapped in what looked like the tails of numerous snakes. They were hideous, glistening like a mass of wet intestines, and except for the last 6 inches, every one of them was a sickening, milky color. Dawn's breath returned in great heaves as she shot forward, but when she threw open the hood, what she found was too horrible to describe. Aside from the folded, half-swallowed remains of her best friend, something else had taken up residence in the Camaro, something outside of basic human comprehension. With the force of a shotgun blast, a mass of pale, red-tipped tentacles shot up and coiled around her throat. As tears flowed, she waited for the end, but the thing under the hood did not squeeze. In that terrible moment, as otherworldly whispers filled her up, Dawn understood that she had been wrong about one thing for a very long time. As it happened, Harry Lagrange had loved his granddaughter more than anything. He had simply needed to keep her away, to protect her from the indescribable burden that had turned their special lady into a nest.